Welcome to my channel, Daily Divert. In this video, we're going to delve into one of the most unique and memorable events that unfolded in the beautiful land of Papua New Guinea during World War II, the Kokoda Trail campaign. We'll explore this challenging solo journey and discover why a particular group of people involved were named Wuzzy Angels. Before we proceed, please hit the subscribe button below so you won't miss our latest videos. Let's get started.
I'm standing on what is considered sacred ground by many Australians. This is the village of Kokoda on the northern slopes of the Owen Stanley mountain range in Papua New Guinea. The name Kokoda is significant to Australia because many Australians fought and died here in World War II. This village gave its name to a track that snakes its way for about 100 kilometres south from here to Oa's Corner near Port Moresby, the capital of Papua New Guinea. The Kokoda Trail is a narrow, precarious path that winds through some of the most inhospitable and isolated terrain on Earth. It crosses high, rugged mountains, drops down into deep valleys, and passes through fast-flowing rivers. It cuts through dense jungle that's infested with snakes, leeches, mosquitoes and other nasty blood-sucking insects. The track is often drenched by tropical storms that make it wet, muddy, slippery and dangerous. It's really hard going. The steep gradients are demanding and exhausting. It was on the Kokoda Trail, under hellish conditions, that a small force of young, ill-equipped and undertrained Australians held off the Japanese army and stopped it from advancing along the track towards mainland Australia. The fighting was desperate and vicious. The Australian troops were wounded and exhausted beyond belief. But somehow, they always managed to find that extra bit of spirit to fight on, with the help of angels. Angels with black faces and frizzy hair. Local people that they affectionately called Wazzy Angels because of their compassion, care and dedication. Their story will surprise you and inspire you.
I saw their wounds, festering sores, fierce grip behind closed doors. Their spirits
War came to the Pacific in December 1941. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, invaded the Malay Peninsula and bombed Singapore. After capturing Singapore in February 1942, they next planned to advance southeast and capture Port Moresby with a seaborne attack using their navy. However, their plans were disrupted when the American naval victories in the Battle of the Coral Sea in May and at Midway in early June broke the dominance of the Japanese Navy in the Pacific. But this setback didn't change Japan's plan. Their goal was still to establish a stronghold in Port Moresby. And if they couldn't do it through their navy, then they'd do it through their army, by marching overland along the Kokoda Trail and across the Owen Stanley Ranges from here, the northern shore of Papua New Guinea. On the 21st of July 1942, Japanese troops landed here in the Gona Sanananda area and established a beachhead. A full-scale offensive was soon underway as they moved south towards Port Moresby. The Kokoda campaign had begun. It consisted of a series of fierce battles fought along the Kokoda Trail over 4 months between July and November 1942. The Australians were determined to stop the Japanese advance along the track and prevent them from establishing a base in Port Moresby that would threaten Australia and leave it isolated and vulnerable. Kokoda was a defining battle for Australia, and perhaps the most significant campaign fought by Australians in World War II. more Australians died in the months fighting in Papua New Guinea than in any other campaign of the war. Conditions along the track were horrific. The terrain was steep and inhospitable, the rain was constant, the track was muddy, slippery and treacherous. Food and ammunition supplies were practically non-existent. The Australian troops were young, inexperienced and poorly equipped, and they constantly battled malaria and dysentery as well as the Japanese. Australia's 39th Battalion, along with elements of the Papuan Infantry Battalion, were the first to engage the advancing Japanese in a series of short but critical encounters. They were part of the so-called Maroubra Force. The 39th Battalion was under strength, consisting of only around 600 men, and many of them were 18 and 19-year-olds who were involved in battle for the very first time. The Japanese advanced southwards into the foothills of the Owen Stanley mountain range, and after a fierce battle against an Australian force that was outnumbered, outgunned and out-equipped, they captured the village of Kokoda along with its strategically vital airfield. From Kokoda, the Australians fell into a long fighting withdrawal along the track across the Owen Stanley range. They were determined to resist the Japanese advance as much as possible, ambushing, delaying, counter-attacking and frustrating the enemy as best they could. There were major battles at Ishurava, Mission Ridge and Brigade Hill, but the Japanese juggernaut continued its relentless advance southwards toward Port Moresby. The desperately tired but determined Australian forces kept continually defending, retreating and counter-attacking until they came to Imita Ridge. Here, with Port Moresby virtually in sight, the Australians dug in to make a final stand. This ridge was the last natural defensive position before defeat. There was nowhere else to go. The time had come. The moment of destiny had arrived. The Japanese held the opposite ridge at Ioribawa. This was the final showdown. But now, the tables had turned. The Japanese were at the end of a long, desperately tiring march. Their supply lines were stretched to the limit. They were exhausted. And the Australians had one last-ditch surprise for the Japanese. They had laboriously dragged 25-pounder guns up from Port Moresby, and suddenly they opened fire on the Japanese positions. That was the turning point of the Kokoda campaign. The Australian shelling smashed the Japanese barricades. Ioribawa was as far as the Japanese advanced. From that time on, the Japanese began a long retreat back along the track to Kokoda and back to the sea, with the Australians pursuing them and attacking them the whole time. Now it was the turn of the Japanese to experience what the Australians had put up with during the preceding months. The Australians drove the Japanese back to Gona and Sanananda and the northern shore of Papua New Guinea. And by the 22nd of January 1943, all organised resistance by the Japanese in Papua New Guinea had ceased. In the fierce and desperate battles along the Kokoda track, more than 600 Australians were killed and 1,600 wounded, with a further 4,000 casualties due to sickness and disease. But those figures would have been a lot higher, and the outcome of the Kokoda campaign far different if it were not for the help of the local people, who the Australians affectionately referred to as Wuzzy Angels. During those grueling days of the Kokoda campaign, thousands of local natives from along the track and further afield were employed as carriers or porters. They carried food, weapons, ammunition, equipment, supplies and medicines. In fact, all that was required for the war effort forward along the track to the front lines. They walk long distances with heavy loads. And then these brave and selfless men would turn around and carry the increasing number of sick and wounded back through the mud to safety, using stretchers or supporting and guiding those who could walk. These fuzzy Wuzzy Angels were named for both their frizzy hair and their kind, helpful role. But they hadn't always had a caring and compassionate reputation. Most of the fuzzy Wuzzy Angels belonged to the Kokoda tribe, who lived in the villages along the Kokoda Trail. Traditionally, the Kokoda were a hostile and warlike people who had a reputation for bloodshed and violence. They were feared by the neighbouring tribes. But early in the 20th century, an amazing transformation took place. In 1908, the first Christian missionaries moved into the Kokoda area and established the Bisia Tabu mission station near the entrance to the Kokoda Trail. Under the leadership of Septimus Carr, they built schools and taught the people to read and write. They built medical clinics and shared the principles of health, hygiene and clean living. They built churches where the Christian message of grace, commandment keeping, temperance, peace and compassion was preached. Then in 1924, pioneer Seventh-day Adventist missionary William Locke and his family moved inland along the Kokoda Trail to the village of Ifogi. There they set up a clinic and a mission school. And soon the Christian message of peace and kindness spread throughout the region and was embraced by the other villages along the Kokoda Trail. The people had been transformed. Bloodshed and violence was replaced by peace and kindness. When the war came to the Kokoda Trail villages in 1942, the changes that Christianity had made to the people's lives came through. The war had a devastating impact on the local people. Their villages were bombed, their homes burned, their gardens destroyed, their livestock shot. They were displaced. Yet through it all, they remained faithful to the Christian message of peace and compassion and loyal to the people who shared it with them. Historian Alan Smith highlights this.
Every village along the Kokoda Trail had come under some measure of Adventist mission influence, with baptised members in most villages. The Kokoda had become so transformed that when the Japanese penetrated the area in their advance to Port Moresby, the Kokodas decided to remain loyal to their missionary friends.
This view is confirmed by the descendants of the Fuzzy Wuzzy Angels today. Many of them continue their family tradition of carrying supplies for Australians along the Kokoda Trail. Only now, it's for the thousands of tourists who walk the track each year.